The late afternoon sun burned low over the southern Arizona desert, casting an endless sea of gold and rust that shimmered under the heat. Captain Sarah Whitmore had flown these skies enough times to know the terrain like the back of her hand. The winding dry riverbeds, the sprawling mesquite groves, and the scattered rock formations that looked almost alive in the fading light. Her H-64 Apache gunship thrummed beneath her, the vibration a steady reminder of the machine's raw power and precision. From her vantage point, the desert looked peaceful, deceptively so. She knew better. Peace in these parts was fragile. A thin skin stretched over tension that never really went away. On the U.S.-Mexico border, trouble could rise from anywhere. Drug smugglers, armed convoys, human traffickers, and lately, something far more organized, far more dangerous. Her co-pilot, Warrant Officer Dan Keller, broke the comfortable silence, got a new directive coming through. His voice was even, but there was an undertone that made her glance over. What kind of directive? Dan's gloved fingers tapped at the digital display. Border patrols got visual on a suspected cartel convoy. Heavy armament. They're moving fast, northbound. Command wants us to intercept before they reach the crossing. Sarah adjusted her helmet mic. Location? Dan brought up a satellite overlay. 2 clicks south of the canyon stretch near Red Mesa. If they make it past that choke point, they'll vanish into open range. Her gaze lingered on the map. That canyon was tricky, narrow, twisting, with high ridges on both sides. Aye. Perfect place for an ambush, or to vanish completely. She'd flown over it enough times to know how easy it was to disappear in there. Any other assets in the area? She asked. Negative. Ground units are 30 minutes out. We're closest. Sarah exhaled slowly, steadying her focus. All right, let's move. The Apache banked hard to the left, dipping low over the scrubland. The roar of its twin engines grew deeper, more insistent as they gained speed. Below them, the desert. Blurred, a mixture of dusty reds, pale greens, and shadowed gulches. Sarah's mind went to Afghanistan, the Helmand province years ago, where she'd flown similar missions against Taliban convoys. The terrain here was different in color, but not in spirit. The same oppressive heat. The same sense that every ridge could hide a threat. The same gut feeling that things could turn deadly in seconds. Convoy speed? She asked, scanning the radar feed. Dan frowned. Holding steady at 45? Wait. He leaned closer to the screen. That's weird. I'm losing them. She glanced over. Losing them? They just disappeared. His tone shifted from confusion to something closer to concern. 1 second I've got 3 strong returns. The next, nothing. Sarah narrowed her eyes at the ridgeline ahead. They went into the canyon. Dan shook his head. No way they're moving that fast. Even at top speed, they'd still be in sight. She tightened her grip on the cyclic. The desert ahead seemed too still. No dust plumes. No engine noise drifting up from the lowlands. Just silence and the faint rush of air past the canopy. The radio crackled, and a sharp burst of static made them both glance at the comms panel. A voice broke through, distorted but urgent. Possible. Ambush. Red Mesa. Do not. Then nothing. Sarah's stomach nodded. Dan looked at her. What do you think? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes traced the jagged shadows spilling down the canyon walls, remembering every training lecture about kill zones, every after-action report about teams who flew too far in without backup. But something in her, something deep, stubborn, and honed by years of combat, refused to turn away. If it's an ambush, she said finally, then we need to see what's waiting. Dan hesitated. We go in. We might not come back out. Her mouth curved into the faintest smirk. Then let's make sure we control the terms. The Apache's nose dipped slightly as she adjusted the collective, bringing them lower toward the canyon mouth. Heat waves shimmered off the rocky ground. The rotors carved through the air with a rhythmic, almost menacing beat. Somewhere ahead, the convoy, or whoever had been pretending to be a convoy, was either running scared or waiting to spring a trap. And Captain Sarah Whitmore had just decided she was going to walk right into it. The Apache descended in a slow, deliberate arc, its massive rotors thumping a steady war drum over the empty desert. The mouth of the canyon rose ahead, a jagged gash in the earth, shadows pooling inside like black ink. Sarah adjusted her visor to cut the glare from the setting sun. The light was turning syrupy gold, stretching every shadow until it seemed to breathe. From above, the canyon looked like an ancient scar, twisting, unpredictable, with walls that reached high enough to hide almost anything from aerial view. She knew the risks. Once inside, the Apache would lose some of its maneuvering advantage. The walls would funnel their movement. Radar return would be messy, and every ridge could hide a rifle barrel or the flare of a missile launch. Heat's dropping fast, Dan reported, studying the forward-looking infrared feed. Air temperatures down 5 degrees since we hit the canyon lip, means shades covering the floor. Sarah nodded without looking over. Cooler air meant denser pockets where thermal readings could blur. Whoever was hiding down there would have every advantage. The helicopter's shadow raced along the canyon rim before diving into darkness. The sudden temperature shift pressed against Sarah's skin through her flight suit. Her visor dimmed slightly as the bright desert gave way to muted reds and deep purples. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement, the shift of a bird startled by their passage. But it wasn't the bird that made her pulse quicken. It was the flash of light on rock just beyond it, brief and needle-sharp, like sun glinting off metal. Dan saw it too. Did you? Yeah, Sarah cut in. Upper right ridge. Could be optics. He keyed a quick zoom on the targeting pod, but the glint was gone. Just bare sandstone, cracked and pitted by centuries of weather. Sarah kept them moving, weaving slightly left and right. She'd learned in Afghanistan that unpredictable flight paths kept snipers guessing. Multiple heat signatures, and said, his voice tighter now. Small, scattered, maybe 6 or 7. Not vehicles, stationary. Positions? Both ridges. Looks like they've got the high ground covered. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That's not a convoy escort. That's Overwatch. She let the thought hang in the cockpit air. Overwatch meant preparation. Preparation meant planning. And planning meant they knew an Apache was coming. The radio crackled again, not from command, but from an open frequency. A garbled voice, heavy with static, bled through. Possible ambush site. Recommend you. The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Dan's jaw tightened. That's twice now. Somebody's trying to warn us. Sarah didn't respond. Warnings didn't matter. What mattered was the ground truth in front of them. The heat readings, the glint of optics, the narrowing canyon walls that were beginning to feel less like terrain and more like a cage. The Apache's rotors sent ripples of dust swirling along the canyon floor. The machine's heavy, predatory hum echoed back in strange patterns, making it hard to tell where sound originated. In the confined space, even her own aircraft sounded like something hunting her from behind. You're thinking what I'm thinking, Dan said finally. That we're flying into a box? That this box has teeth. She allowed herself. The faintest grin, eyes still scanning. Boxes with teeth are fun. Gives us something to sharpen ours on. They pressed deeper. The canyon bent sharply to the left, forcing Sarah to slow. The ridges above grew higher, blotting out more of the fading sunlight. It was like flying into an arena where the crowd was invisible, but waiting for blood. Then something subtle changed. The Apache's sensors began to lose the forward returns. Entirely. The heat signatures had either moved or were deliberately masking themselves. Losing them again, Dan muttered. Switching to full IR sweep. Sarah's voice was calm, almost conversational. Either they've gone cold, or they're letting us in before they light up. That's when she felt it, that crawling, invisible weight on the back of her neck. The one that said someone has eyes on you right now. Talk to me, she said. Dan's eyes stayed locked on the display. 2, maybe 3 possible firing points ahead. Can't confirm. Weapons yet? The Apache emerged from the bend into a wider section of canyon. At first glance, it seemed empty. Just a riverbed long dry, rocks scattered like bones, walls looming on both sides. But Sarah's instincts screamed otherwise. She had learned long ago that in moments like this, silence wasn't peace. It was the deep breath before the trigger pull. Dan's voice was lower now, almost a whisper despite the cockpit's noise. Sarah, something's wrong. These positions aren't random. They're triangulated. Her grip on the cyclic tightened just enough to feel the strain through her gloves. They're boxing us in. Exactly. She eased the Apache into a slow hover, nose pivoting toward the upper ridges. Nothing moved. Not a shadow, not a bird. The only motion was the ripple of fine dust dancing along the canyon floor. And then, the faintest movement. The kind that would be invisible, without hours of training to spot it. A figure, prone, adjusting the angle of something long and dark. Sniper, 1 o'clock high, she said immediately. Before Dan could respond, the radio barked to life again. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a burst of fast, clipped speech in a language neither of them recognized. The tone alone made Sarah's pulse spike. They know we're here, Dan said flatly. The words had barely left his mouth when a second glint flashed, not the brief wink of optics, but the unmistakable flare of a missile launch tube catching the last rays of sun. And that was when Sarah knew for certain the convoy wasn't running from them. It had never even been real. They were already in the trap. A glint on the ridge became a streak of fire. Dan's voice came sharp, instinctive. Missile, 3 o'clock. Sarah didn't waste a breath answering. Her hands were already moving, shoving the cyclic forward while her left foot stomped. Hard on the pedal, whipping the Apache into a dive spin. The missile tore past the tail rotor, close enough for its heat to shimmer in the cockpit glass, before detonating against the far canyon wall. The explosion rolled through the air, a deep, bone-vibrating thump. No time to breathe. The ridges erupted in muzzle flashes, dozens of them. Heavy machine gun fire hammered the Apache's armored plating, sending vibrations up through the seat and into Sarah's spine. Tracers cut the air, glowing threads in the dim canyon light. They're everywhere. Dan's voice was high but controlled, his training kicking in even as rounds chewed chunks from the rock around them. Sarah yanked the Apache into a hard bank, keeping their profile unpredictable. Identify and mark priority threats. She barked. On his screen, Dan's targeting reticle danced over heat signatures. 2 RPG teams. High ridge left. 3 heavy MGs spread along the right. More small arms than I can count. Rounds slapped against the Apache's armored nose, each one a sharp metallic crack. Sarah felt the machine straining under her, its rotors thundering in confined air. She eased power to the engines, enough to stay mobile, but low enough to keep from silhouetting against the sky. The canyon was alive now, a kill zone sprung with surgical precision. Whoever had set this trap knew her bird's capabilities, where it was strong, where it was vulnerable. Sarah's mind worked as fast as her hands. If they climbed, they'd be a perfect target for missiles. If they hovered, they'd be chewed apart by heavy guns. She dipped the Apache lower, skimming the canyon floor. Stone blurred past just feet from the skids. The machine's shadow twisted and stretched along the ground, warped by the irregular terrain. Above, the muzzle flashes danced like angry fireflies. "RPG left," Dan shouted. Sarah jerked the stick right. The rocket hissed through where they'd been a split second earlier, slamming into the opposite wall in a violent burst of stone and fire. Shards rattled against the cockpit glass. The air was thick with sound, the high crack of rifles, the deep chug of machine guns, the mechanical growl of the Apache's rotors cutting the space between them and death. "They want us to panic," she said, half to Dan, half to herself. Dan's laugh was humorless. "They're doing a good job of it." Sarah's eyes narrowed, every nerve ending burning with the same message. Don't give them what they want. In the chaos, she caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. A line of figures further down the canyon, crouched in disciplined formation. They weren't firing yet. They were waiting. "Secondary team ahead," she said. "They're boxing us from both ends," Dan replied grimly. Sarah felt it click into place. The fake convoy. The sudden disappearance. The scattered Overwatch teams. The secondary formation waiting to seal the trap. They hadn't just stumbled into an ambush. They'd been lured, studied, and drawn into a perfect kill funnel. "Whoever planned this," she said tightly, "wasn't just some cartel crew." Before Dan could respond, another missile trail streaked upward, this one from the far end of the canyon, the team that had been waiting. Sarah's hands and mind moved in the same heartbeat. She dropped the Apache into a low, aggressive slide, using the curve of the canyon wall to break line of sight. The missile skimmed the top of the ridge before detonating somewhere out of sight, the blast echoing back in jagged fragments. "We can't stay here," Dan warned. She smiled, but there was no humor in it, only a razor edge of anticipation. "We're not staying. Where Abudo changed the rules." The machine gun fire intensified, as if the shooter sensed she was planning a breakout. Bullets sparked off the Apache's armor, their impacts sending tiny vibrations through the frame. But Sarah wasn't thinking about surviving the next minute. She was thinking about ending the fight in the next minute. Her eyes locked on the contours of the canyon ahead, the folds of rock, the side gullies, the pockets of shadow. She saw them not as obstacles, but as tools. The enemy thought she was trapped. They thought they knew our playbook. They were wrong. The canyon thundered with gunfire, the steady rhythm of the Apache's rotors cutting through the chaos like a war drum. Tracers zipped past the canopy, streaking red-orange against the twilight gloom. Missiles hissed in the distance, heavy machine. Guns roared from the ridges, and somewhere beneath it all, the deep growl of the Apache's twin turboshaft engines kept them airborne. But in the middle of all that, Sarah laughed. It started as a low chuckle, just audible over the coms, then rolled into a clear, unshaken burst of genuine laughter. It wasn't hysterical or unhinged. It was the kind of laugh you heard from someone who had been here before, who understood the stakes, and who knew exactly what she was about to do. Dan whipped his head toward her. "What the hell's funny?" "They think we're trapped," she said, her voice steady despite the maelstrom outside. "They've been playing chess for months, but they've only been looking at the board from one side." Dan frowned, still tracking targets through the thermal scope. "Sarah, this isn't a game." "It's always a game," she interrupted, her hands moving with precise, deliberate motions on the controls. "The question is, do you play it their way, or do you make them play yours?" A burst of heavy rounds struck the Apache's right side, the armor shrugging off the worst of it, but leaving a metallic thud reverberating through the cockpit. Sarah didn't flinch. "Hang on," she said calmly, like she was warning him before. "Hitting a speed bump, not diving into hell. Before Dan could ask, she pushed the cyclic forward hard, dropping the Apache into a steep nose-down plunge toward the canyon floor. The sudden descent pinned them into their seats. Dust, rock, and shadow blurred past the canopy as the helicopter raced downward at a speed no sane pilot would attempt in this terrain. "What are you?" Dan's voice caught as the G-forces pressed against him. "Trying to do? Kill us?" Sarah's grin was sharp. "Not us." The canyon walls grew taller around them as they skimmed barely 20 feet above the rocky ground. The road awash whipped up a choking cloud of dust and debris, swallowing them in a murky veil. Gunfire from above faltered as the shooters lost line of sight. Sarah tapped the controls, bringing the Apache into a weaving pattern, the nose, swinging left and right as she mapped every heat source in her mind. Through the swirling haze, figures glowed bright in the thermal display. Hidden gunners, missile teams, and snipers who had once thought themselves invisible. "They can't see us," Dan realized, "but we can see them." "Exactly," Sarah replied, already lining up the first pass. Dan's targeting reticle locked onto a cluster of 3 bright signatures high on the left ridge. "Rockets armed?" Sarah leveled the Apache just enough for him to have a clean angle. "Send them something to think about." The pod mounted. Rockets whooshed upward, cutting through the dust cloud like arrows through fog. The ridgeline erupted in a spray of fire and shattered stone, the concussive wave rolling back into the canyon and mixing with the echo of rotor blades. Sarah laughed again, not from arrogance, but from the release of tension that came with taking back control. One ridge down. "Let's clean up the rest." They banked hard right, the Apache tilting so far Dan could see the canyon floor through the side glass. Another heat signature popped on the thermal, an RPG team scrambling to set up. "Got him," Dan called. Sarah swung the nose toward them, giving him a perfect line. The chain gun beneath the Apache's nose barked to life, spitting out a stream of 30mm shells. The team vanished in a burst of dust and debris. From above, sporadic gunfire resumed, but the pattern was broken. The ambushers were reacting now, not executing. Their perfect kill box had turned into a scramble for survival. "Look at them," Sarah said, almost conversationally. "No plan survives contact." Dan gave a short, tense laugh of his own. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Enjoying?" "No," she said, eyes scanning for the next cluster of signatures. "But there's a special kind of satisfaction in making predators realize they're the prey." Another group lit up. On thermal, this time further up the canyon. Sarah climbed just enough to crest a small rise in the canyon floor, then dove again, keeping their movement unpredictable. The dust cloud they kicked up hung in the still air, masking them from every direction except the one they chose. Dan armed another rocket pair. "Ready?" Sarah gave a quick nod. "Send it." 2 more bright streaks shot upward. Another explosion rocked the ridgeline, scattering figures like ants in a storm. The canyon was no longer a trap. It was a hunting ground, and Sarah Whitmore was the one holding the rifle. The dust was still settling when Captain Elena Viper Morales pulled the Apache into a low hover behind a ridge. She could hear her own heartbeat thudding in her helmet. The ambush had been calculated, too precise to be coincidence, and now she was sure someone was feeding intel to the enemy. Below, the desert floor lay deceptively quiet, dotted with scraggly mesquite and jagged boulders. Through her thermal scope, faint heat signatures shifted enemy fighters repositioning. They thought she'd taken the bait, but she hadn't. "Viper, this is Wolfpack 2. You clear?" crackled the radio. "Clear enough," she replied, voice steady, though her left hand was tightening on the cyclic. "They wanted me in the canyon. I'm not giving them the satisfaction." Still, something gnawed at her. The enemy's timing, the angles of attack, it was too intimate. Whoever had planned this new Apache tactics inside and out. She zoomed in on one fighter crouched near a rusted truck. He was talking into a satellite phone, glancing over his shoulder toward the mountains. And then she saw it glinting in the sun, a signal mirror, flashing toward a distant ridge. Her gut clenched. That ridge wasn't just rocks. It was a concealed mortar position. She keyed her mic to the ground team. "Wolfpack, you've got incoming fire from the East Ridge in 30 seconds. Move now." Shouts erupted over the radio. Boots pounding over sand. The first mortar landed exactly where her helicopter had hovered a minute earlier. The explosion blossomed into a shockwave that rattled the canopy. Viper smirked. Nice try. But the fight was far from over. She pulled the Apache higher, keeping to the sun's glare, and circled wide. Her co-pilot, Warrant Officer Harris, was scanning furiously. "Got movement in Sector 7-3 technicals with mounted guns, moving fast. Mark M," she said. Harris tagged the vehicles, and her HUD lit up with targeting diamonds. Viper dipped low, letting the helicopter's rotor wash kick up a sandstorm behind her. The enemy trucks swerved, gunners opening fire. Tracer rounds zipped past the cockpit, each one a neon thread of death. Viper's laughter low, almost mocking filled. The comes. "Oh, you boys picked the wrong dance partner." With a squeeze of the trigger, the Apache's chain gun roared. The first truck erupted, sending flaming debris tumbling into the desert. The second swerved hard, tires shredding under the spray of rounds. The third tried to flee into a narrow gulch. "Missile hot," Harris said. "Send it." The hellfire streaked out, slicing the air with a banshee wail before slamming into the gulch. A column of black smoke curled skyward. But even as the vehicles burned, Harris' voice sharpened. "Viper." Look northwest. Through the haze, an armored convoy was emerging, heavier firepower, better armor. Not insurgent scrap metal. These were stolen military-grade MRAPs, each one bristling with machine guns and painted in stolen desert camo. Viper's mind raced. They knew we'd come here. They're not retreating, they're corralling us. It wasn't just an ambush anymore. This was a trap inside a trap. She opened the secure channel to command. "Hammerbase, this is Viper. Multiple enemy MRAPs advancing from northwest. They're running a layered kill zone. Recommend immediate air support." "Negative," came the reply. "All air assets are tied up. You're on your own for 6 minutes." 6 minutes in a kill zone felt like an eternity. Viper's eyes narrowed. Then we make 6 minutes feel like hell for them. She banked hard, rotor tips screaming, and dove toward the convoy. Harris muttered, "You're insane." But he was already locking targets. The first MRAP fired a torrent of rounds that clanged off the Apache's armor. The sound was deafening. Viper weaved through the barrage, closing the gap until the enemy. Gunners could barely depress their barrels. She unleashed rockets at point-blank range. 2 MRAPs vanished in twin fireballs, but the blast wave shoved the Apache sideways, alarms blaring. She fought the controls, feeling the bird shudder. One MRAP pushed forward, trying to ram through the burning wrecks. Viper angled the chain gun and stitched the driver's compartment with fire. The vehicle lurched, skidding sideways into a dune. 2 minutes down, 4 to go, Harris said grimly. Then an unexpected voice broke in on the comms. "Viper, you don't know me, but I've been waiting for this." Static crackled, and then GPS coordinates flashed on their display. A possible artillery strike, location sent from an unknown source. Viper hesitated. It could be a trap, or it could turn the tide. The MRAPs regrouped, one attempting to flank. From the south, Viper had seconds to decide. She met Harris' eyes through their visors. "Load the grid, we gamble." He input the coordinates, and seconds later, distant thunder rolled across the desert. Artillery shells whistled down, detonating with surgical precision right on the enemy's position. When the smoke cleared, the remaining MRAPs were in flames, but Weber's pulse didn't slow. Whoever had just saved them knew exactly where she was. And that meant they'd been watching the whole time. The desert night had an odd stillness to it, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Captain Alana Ramirez felt that weight pressing against her chest as she hovered the Apache low behind a jagged ridge. The mission clock glowed faintly. In the dim cockpit light, 23 minutes until the window closed. 23 minutes until the enemy convoy disappeared into the labyrinth of wadis, where tracking them would be near impossible. Her gunner, Chief Warrant Officer Mark Davids, kept scanning the terrain through the target acquisition display. "They're out there," he muttered, "hiding, waiting." Elena's hands tightened around the cyclic. The ambush from 2 nights ago was still burned into her mind. The flash of RPG trails in the dark, the shudder of metal under impact, the screaming over the comms. She had laughed then, not out of mockery, but as a way to cut through the fear for the crew listening. The sound had thrown the enemy off, a strange confidence in the middle of chaos. But tonight, the stakes were higher. A sudden flicker caught Mark's attention. Heat signature West Ridge, 2 clicks. Elena banked sharply, feeling the Apache's rotors bite into the cold desert air. The thermal feed lit up. 3 distinct signatures, tucked behind a rock outcrop, their position elevated, perfect for another ambush. "This is too easy," she whispered. It felt wrong. Mark caught it too. Bait. She pulled back, letting the Apache sink lower. On the ground, their special operations team, call sign Viper 6, was advancing on foot, their comms blending with the faint hum of rotor blades. The terrain was treacherous. Uneven ground, thorny brush, loose gravel that slid under boots. Every step made them vulnerable. "Viper 6, this is Talon 2-1, Elena said over the secure channel. "You've got shooters 2 clicks west. Possible bait. Adjust route." "Copy that," came the calm voice of Major Grant, the team leader. "We'll detour. You keep them nervous." Nervous was exactly what she planned to do. Elena climbed, letting the Apache's silhouette appear briefly against the star-smeared sky, just enough for those watching to know she was there. Then she dropped back into shadow, skimming the ridgeline. Mark loaded a burst of 30mm rounds into the chain. "Guns feed." "They're watching us," he said. "Good," Elena replied. "Let them." A silence between them was tense, but practiced. Every movement, every click of a switch, was muscle memory. They'd flown together for years, each trusting the other's instincts more than their own. Then a blip on the radar. Multiple blips. Elena's heart rate ticked up. 4 vehicles moving fast along a dry riverbed. They weren't running from her. They were running toward something, maybe toward Viper 6's route. "Mark, confirm." Confirmed. Technicals. Heavy machine guns mounted. They're in a hurry. Elena angled the Apache toward the convoy, still keeping low. Through night vision, she could see the glint of mounted weapons, the silhouettes of men bracing themselves for contact. She remembered what her father once told her when she was just a kid in New Mexico, staring up at jets from the nearby base. The quiet moments before the fight are the loudest in your head. He'd been right. Every thought, every image of what could go wrong pressed in on her now. But there was no room for hesitation. "Mark, lock in the lead vehicle." "Locked." "On my mark, fire." The chain gun roared to life. 30mm shells tearing into the sand around the lid truck, shattering its windshield, sending men diving for cover. The vehicle skidded sideways, its tires shredded. The others scattered, opening up with machine gun fire. Tracers ripped through the night sky, orange streaks searching for the Apache's shadow. Elena juked hard left, then right, weaving through. The stream of fire like a dancer. Mark's voice was steady. Got one gunner down, two down. Elena, Major Grant's voice cut in. We're hearing heavy contact north. Can you break them off? She pulled back on the cyclic, climbing. Fast. From altitude, she could see both fights unfolding. Viper 6 pinned near a rock formation to the north, and the convoy she was hammering trying to reposition. Her training told her to focus on the bigger threat to the ground team. Her instincts told her this was still a setup. Grant, they're hurting you, she warned. I see movement east of your position. There was a pause. Understood. We'll hold position. Do your thing. Her thing was about to get loud. Elena banked sharply, diving toward the eastern ridge. The thermal camera picked up fresh heat blooms, more fighters, crouched behind rocks, RPGs at the ready. The moment they saw her, they froze. She grinned, that same grin from 2 nights ago, and toggled the mic to the open channel. Guess who? She said, her voice calm, almost playful. Then the Apache's Hydra rockets streaked out, white trails carving through the night. The explosions lit the ridge in bursts of orange and gold, dust plumes billowing high into the air. Mark exhaled. Targets neutralized. The gunfire against Viper 6's position faltered. Grant came back on comms, his voice still measured, but tinged with relief. That was you, wasn't it? Maybe, Elena said with a small laugh. But even as the humor flickered in her voice, her eyes scanned the horizon. The battlefield was quieter now, but quiet didn't mean safe. The enemy had already proven they could lure them in with precision. She had a feeling this night was far from over. The river lay beneath them like a dark ribbon, winding through the valley's jagged cliffs. From the Apache's cockpit, Captain Elena Vega could see the water glinting faintly under the moonlight, a deceptive calm masking the chaos that was about to unfold. Heat signatures ahead, warned Chief Warrant Officer Carter, his eyes fixed on the forward-looking infrared display. Elena tilted the cyclic gently, bringing the chopper into a low banking maneuver that kept them masked. By the ridge, through the sensors, she counted them. At least 12 figures scattered near the rocky embankment, their weapons' metallic outlines unmistakable. They weren't just hiding. They were waiting. Carter cursed under his breath. That's a kill zone. Elena's lips curled in a faint smile. Then let's not be the ones in it. She didn't take the obvious approach. Instead, she swung the Apache in a wide arc, using the terrain to disappear completely from the insurgents' line of sight. The noise of the rotors was muffled by the valley walls, and for several tense seconds, the world went eerily quiet inside. The cockpit. That's when the first tracer rounds lit the night. The enemy had anticipated an approach from the south. Bright red streaks tore through the air where they thought the Apache would appear. The ground erupted in spurts of dirt and sparks. But Elena's craft wasn't there. She was already slipping in from the east, hugging the cliff face so tightly that branches scraped against the fuselage. Target lock, 3 o'clock low, Carter announced. The AGM-114 Hellfire missiles armed with a mechanical click. Elena's hands were steady on the controls. Her breathing was slow, deliberate. The enemy fighters had no idea how close death had come to them. And then, faintly, a sound rose above the thrum of the rotor blades. It was her, laughing, a short, sharp burst of almost playful amusement, carried over the intercom, filled the cockpit. Carter glanced at her, brow furrowed, but didn't say a word. He'd flown with her long enough to know that this meant the tide was about to turn hard in their favor. Down below, the insurgents were shifting nervously, scanning the ridgeline. They couldn't see the Apache, but they could feel it. One of them fired wildly into the dark, trying to provoke a reaction. He got one. The hellfire left its rail with a deafening roar, a streak of light slicing across the black sky before detonating in a thunderous shockwave that rattled the very rocks. Dirt, smoke, and shrapnel erupted in a geyser where the ambush team's heavy machine gun had been set up. Splash one, Carter confirmed. The remaining fighters scrambled, diving for cover. Elena didn't give them time. With a swift twist of the cyclic, she pivoted the chopper into a hover position just above the river bend. The M230 chain gun. Beneath the Apache swiveled into place, its targeting system already tracking the scattering heat signatures. She squeezed the trigger. 30mm shells poured down in a punishing rain, kicking up clouds of dust and tearing through whatever cover the ambushers had thought would protect them. Every burst echoed through the valley, bouncing off the cliffs like the laughter they'd heard moments before. A sound now burned into their fear. Within 40 seconds, the ambush site was silent, except for the rush of the river and the faint whine of the Apache's engines. Carter scanned the infrared display one more time. No more movement. Elena eased the chopper back into a slow climb, the valley stretching out beneath them. She glanced at her fuel gauge. They were still good, but not by much. The mission wasn't over, and somewhere beyond those cliffs, the convoy they were protecting was still threading its way through hostile territory. The radio crackled. "Vega, report." It was Major Dalton's voice, tense but steady. "Ambush neutralized," she replied. "Convoy route is clear for the next 5 clicks. We're moving ahead to scout further. Copy that. You've got eyes on the big picture now. Stay sharp. Intel says this wasn't their main force." Her grip tightened slightly on the cyclic. If this wasn't their main force, then somewhere out there, a larger, more dangerous enemy was still waiting. She could feel it in her gut, a predator's instinct honed by years in the sky. She pushed the Apache forward, the rotors cutting. Through the night, her mind already calculating possible routes, fallback positions, and strike angles. In the darkness below, the river kept flowing, carrying with it the fading echoes of laughter and gunfire. A reminder to anyone listening that the sky belonged to her tonight. And she wasn't done yet. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the battered desert. Captain Elena Vega's Apache hummed steadily as it cruised low above the rocky terrain, the air thick with the scent of dust and spent gunpowder. The adrenaline from the night's battle still coursed through her veins, every nerve alert. Below, the remnants of the ambush lay scattered, smoldering vehicles, spent cartridges, and the silent echoes of a fight that had nearly claimed her and her team. Yet this was no time for relief. Somewhere ahead, the real enemy was waiting. Her co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Carter, kept eyes on the sensors. "Vega, I'm picking up movement. Heavy activity about 2 clicks east. Definitely not a retreat." Elena's gaze sharpened. "Then it's time to finish this." Their mission was clear: escort the convoy safely through hostile territory. But now it had become a hunt to root out the source of the deadly ambush and stop it before it could strike again. The Apache banked hard toward the east ridge, rotors slicing through the crisp morning air. As they approached, the terrain opened into a wide valley dotted with crumbling ruins and jagged boulders, the perfect fortress for a last stand. Enemy forces spread out, roughly 30 personnel, Carter reported. Multiple weapons, emplacements, and 2 probable missile launchers. Elena felt the weight of the moment settle over her. Every mission taught her that final strikes carried the heaviest risks and the highest stakes. She keyed the mic. "Prepare for suppression fire. We hit them hard and fast." Rockets screamed into the valley, trailing white-hot streaks against the pale sky. Explosions rocked the ground, sending plumes of dust and debris skyward. The enemy responded instantly, unleashing a hail of machine gun fire that hammered the Apache's armor. The cockpit filled with the roar of battle, the crackle of rounds, the whine of missiles, the steady growl of the chain gun. Elena's hands moved instinctively, weaving the aircraft through the chaos, each breath measured and precise. 2 missile locks, Carter warned. Elena rolled the Apache sharply, dodging the incoming fire. The missiles detonated harmlessly against the rocky walls. She smiled grimly. They're fast, but not fast enough. Below, the enemy fighters scattered, trying to regroup amidst the carnage. But the Apache's relentless assault tore through their defenses. Rockets found their marks, tearing through weapons emplacements and armored vehicles. Amid the chaos, Elena caught sight of a figure moving with purpose, a man attempting to flee through the rocky outcrops. "Target on the move," she said. "Lock and engage." The Hellfire missile launched with a banshee's scream, tracking the fleeing man's heat signature. Seconds later, the explosion erupted in a thunderous roar, silencing the threat. As the dust settled, Alana's voice softened, the tension easing for the first time since the ambush began. "We've broken their back," she said. Carter nodded. "Convoy is clear. Ground teams report no further resistance." Elena let out a long breath, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. Yet even in victory, her eyes scanned the horizon, alert, vigilant. The laughter she had released moments before the first strike echoed in her mind, a symbol of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Mission complete, but the battle for these skies was far from over.